Trust me girl, you do not want to have a swim. Here is an example of what paddock shelters we use and freak out and they full speed just bash into the fence. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. For those that are new here, hello, my name is Alicia. So I have currently been doing a calf rearing series here on my YouTube channel, and today we're going to be doing episode 6, which is all about moving those calves outside. So I hope you guys have been enjoying the episodes that I've been making. Definitely subscribe to my channel if you haven't already to keep updated, and I am definitely open to comments below with any video ideas, and I will try and incorporate it into my future episodes. So in today's episode we're going to be looking at what age we put our calves outside, what requirements they need when they're outside, Fitzgerald. Where was I? What requirements they need outside, and also what issues can arise with having calves outside, such as coccidiosis. So yeah, I hope you enjoy today's video. Hopefully Fitzgerald stops crowing. And let's get into it. You'll have to excuse Fitzgerald if he is crowing throughout this whole video. I definitely need to get one of those little microphone thingies that I've seen. But yeah, maybe one day. Anyways, so moving calves outside is definitely my favourite part of calf rearing. So the calves are kept in these sheds for about 3 weeks, and then when we let them out into the paddock for the first time, I will literally sit there for half an hour watching them race around the paddock. It is so cute. It's like they're finding their legs for the first time. They're hooning around the paddocks with their tails in the air, bucking and bellowing, crashing into each other. It's definitely something that you don't want to miss. Oh, that was a big crash. Did you get a bit of a fright there? Little chicken. So I like to get my calves outside at around 3 weeks of age. Now this definitely all depends on several factors, but the main one is we need to make sure they have a good strong sucking reflex, a good feeding technique, and that the group is pretty much feeding evenly all at the same time. So when they're in a shed like this behind me, they're all on compartment feeders, so there's no competition for the amount of milk that they're having. But then once they're outside, they go on that open trailer feeder. They all need to be feeding roughly at the same rate, otherwise we go into the issue of some calves are feeding more and some are having less. I personally think it is best to have calves outside rather than inside, because it's not natural for them to be in a high density environment, lots of calves in a small space, breeding ground for bacteria and easy to spread infections and things like that. So yeah, we just like to get our calves outside as soon as we can. Now bear in mind they are only young, they are only 3 weeks old when you put them outside, so they definitely still need access to shelter. So I will show you a short clip shortly of what shelters we use, but it doesn't have to be anything flash, just somewhere where they can get out of the rain, keep dry and keep warm. So we don't want our calves to get cold, because obviously they will start using all of their energy shivering and trying to keep warm rather than using their energy into growing, and which at the end of the day we want them to grow and get to that weaning weight as soon as possible. Alright, so here is an example of what paddock shelters we use. You'll have to excuse the cows mooing in the background. So it's nothing flash, just pretty much somewhere where all the calves can fit. So ideally you just need a space where every calf can go in and be able to sit down and keep out of the wind and rain. Everyone's in their outdoor shelter. This shelter is also on skids. It just makes it easier to shift it around to different paddocks rather than having a shelter that's fixed to the ground. It just gives it a bit of versatility. Also, if it gets all mucky inside, it's also good to be able to shift it. You can though have fixed shelters and just put mulch in. Both will work great, but yeah, it's just personal preference, I suppose. Hey. There's one more thing I wanted to add, and it is about calf covers. So obviously there's also the option of putting calf covers on calves. In the past we have done this. It actually was a little bit of a disaster. Definitely don't recommend those cheap plastic ones that make a loud noise when the calves run, because when you put it on the calves they hear the noise and freak out, and I mean freak out, and they full speed just bash into the fence. So yeah, I ended up having a lot of damaged calves when I used the covers. But if you're in New Zealand, Sattery Warehouse do have really good canvas covers. They've got wool lined options as well, and I do recommend those. We have used them in the past, but I think it's warm here where we are. We're only 10 minutes away from the beach. Let's talk about paddock size. So I've got to keep walking because I'm getting sucked to death in this paddock. But as you can see behind me, we like to have quite small paddocks, mainly because when you first let your calves into a paddock, they don't really know where they're getting fed, so it can be a mission walking a long way if your paddock's big to try and get your calves and bring them to the feeders. So yeah, it just makes it a lot easier. Also easier to keep an eye on things because you can see all your calves. If you've got those big paddocks with dips and stuff, yeah, you might not see a calf or forget to feed it. Alright, so moving on to calf fencing. So I'll take you over here and show you what fencing we use. We use 8-wire sheep netting, and we've found just this is the best for calves and the most economical. Of course 7-wire post and batten would be a good idea, same with post and rail, but those two options are just quite a bit more expensive than this. I don't recommend using electric fencing on calves because, as I said earlier, when you first let them out into the paddock, they just hoon. They will crash into fences. So if your fences are only 2 or 4 wires and they can't see them, then yeah, not ideal for calves because calves, yeah, will just run and crash into it. Same with electric tapes. Electric tapes don't work with calves. You've got to train animals with electric fencing. So I definitely learned this the hard way, thinking that I could keep calves behind electric tapes, and no, that was a complete fail. So yeah, highly recommend 7-wire fencing or the sheep netting or post and rail if you've got the money to do so. I love how I'm walking around filming, but literally if I sit here like this, I will start getting slobbered and eaten to death by hungry calves. Or get my clothes ripped. Miss. So, we've got to keep on walking, doing little laps. Right, flag that idea, I've come onto the other side of the paddock. But this fence is a perfect example of kind of what not to have. We are planning to replace it with post and rail, but for now it's alright. The calves actually do go through it and get out on the driveway most mornings. But yeah, make sure you have your wires nice and tight because the calves will put their head through, come through it, or either they put their head through, pull back and rip out their air tags. So yeah, make sure that you are tightening your fences. Or better still, replace them, eh? It's on the list. Oh, and here's a perfect example. And she's in my garden. Come here, you. Cheryl. Come here. Come here. Come on. Hop down. Trust me, girl, you do not want to have a swim. Alright, well, we'll get her back in shortly. Make sure your calves have access to clean, fresh water. And make sure that the trough is accessible. I have seen some troughs that are too high for the calves. Remember, they're not adult though. Sometimes those big concrete troughs are too high. So once our calves are moved outside and they're 3 weeks of age, they go on to once a day feeding. This is because we want them to start being hungry in the afternoons, which encourages them to start eating meal and hay, which develops their rumen, and that essentially gets them closer to being weaned off milk. They get fed on a big trailer feeder once they're outside. It's just a lot easier to feed a big volume of calves on a trailer. Now this year is a little bit different because things are all over the place because we are in the process of building a new calf shed. So we are doing it the hard way, feeding them on fence hung feeders on a gateway. Yeah, so when calves get bigger they definitely get a bit more bulkier, so it has definitely been hard trying to keep them on their individual compartments because they like to bunt each other off. So the only thing that is wrong with feeding them on fence hung feeders, apart from that, is it creates a big muddy area from where you hang your feeders on the gate, whereas if you feed them on a trailer feeder you can drive to a new spot each time to eliminate having a massive muddy area where the calves are fed. But then the only problem with the trailer feeder, I've mentioned it in another video, is that it's quite hard to get it level. Not a lot of people have dead flat paddocks, so leveling the trailer feeder can be a bit challenging, which is why some people might prefer to use the gate hung feeders right through till weaning. Alright, so obviously when the calves are moved outside, they have access to pasture. So a big issue when you put your calves on pasture can be coccidiosis. So coccidia is a small internal parasite that affects the calves' intestines, and they pretty much can pick it up in contaminated grass, contaminated water, or even by grooming themselves. So it affects calves from around 4 weeks old and up. It definitely affects younger animals more than larger animals. It's pretty much ingested a lot easier by calves because you've got a high density environment, lots of calves in a small paddock. So yeah, it's really easy for them to pick it up, which is why you've got to make sure that you feed your calves a meal with a coccidiostat in it. You've also got to make sure you feed your calves the correct rate, like the correct amount of meal for it to be effective and slow the growth of coccidia in those calves. Now, I have made this mistake in the past, and I bought a meal, a cheap meal. Don't buy cheap, it's not always the best. I bought a cheap meal. Later, my calves all got coccidiosis. You can tell when they have coccidiosis because they literally just scouring blood. It looks terrible. Anyway, later on I found out that the meal that I bought didn't have a coccidiostat in it. But in saying that, since switching to a meal with a coccidiostat in it, I've never had an issue with coccidiosis. So I definitely think having a meal with a coccidiostat is definitely a really important one, and definitely make sure they're eating a lot of meal before you put them out into the pasture, which is why when we first get them into the sheds, we put them on that muesli straight away. Literally after they're finished feeding, we'll put it in their mouths. Just encourage them to start eating it from a young age. So here's an example of what some of our meal look like, and it's really obvious on the front of the bag with coccidiostat. So just make sure your bags say that when you buy it. So they also can normally pick it up a lot easier under stress. So that's why when I sell my calves, I let the new buyers know that they should keep feeding the calves meal for a couple more weeks just to help with the transition off milk to avoid getting that coccidiosis. And they normally don't mind because it's normally only like $25 for a bag, and one big bag lasts you a long time. You need to feed them around 2 kgs a calf per day. But if you do get coccidiosis, it's not all over. You just go to the vet and get a product called Baycox. You pretty much drench all your calves and they should be good. Just make sure you keep them separated from other calves, and maybe move all the other calves into a different paddock so then they can't ingest it and pick it up as well. But yeah, like I said earlier, just make sure you give them the appropriate rate of meal, keep up good hygiene, and this shouldn't become a problem for you. But yeah, just keep that in mind when you're putting your calves on pasture. Just make sure you feed them a meal with a coccidiostat in it. Also, when you put calves outside, they're on that lush spring grass which has a high water content, which can lead to a lot more scours. But don't worry, just make sure you're looking at the front end of your calf. Just make sure they're happy in themselves, feeding well, and don't worry because yeah, it's just nutritional scours. It will come and go, and yeah, I'm generally not too worried about it so long as they're still putting on weight and yeah, don't look sick in themselves. Meanwhile, make sure your calves are kept on their own. Don't go mixing calves with older animals. Older cows can bully your calves, chase them into fences and really hurt them. So normally you'd leave your meal out for your calves to ad-lib feed them, but a lot of animals can't eat this meal because the calves are a ruminant animal, meaning they have a 4-chambered stomach, and then animals such as horses, dogs, chickens, pigs, they only have one stomach. So yeah, if they eat this muesli, they can get really sick. It also makes it a lot easier when you're feeding calves because bigger cows will be interested, run over and knock all your calves off and make it a nightmare when you're trying to feed your calves. It's definitely happened to me in the past. They try and like lick the feeder and figure out if they can feed off it too. It just makes it easier just to keep just your calves in the paddock and no other animals. Remember that animals can also spread bugs, so a big one is crypto. I have done a video on that earlier because we do get crypto here. So if you've got sheep lambing in the paddocks with your calves that have crypto, the lambs can pick it up and get crypto as well. So yeah, that's another reason to just keep your calves on their own. Alright, so that pretty much wraps up today's video. I hope everyone got some informative information about it, about when you're letting your calves out. Definitely remember to subscribe to my channel if you want to keep updated with all my episodes. So in episode 7, it's going to be all about milk powder versus whole milk. I'm going to be telling you the benefits and the disadvantages of each one, what we use and how we use it, how we mix them together, and also the different types of milk powder you can get, because I'm sure you've seen all different prices of milk powder out there. You've got whey based ones, casein based ones, so yeah, I'll definitely save that for my next episode. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Bye. Wave! Bye everyone!